there was an unfortunate thing that I did not get to finish yesterday that I kind of talked about and I kind of said it, but I'm not sure that I got to say it as well as I wanted to. It's not. It is trying to record. Yeah, we're on. Thanks. All right. One thing that I think I said, but I kind of didn't get to say. I think I told you yesterday that Alberta and Quebec have a whole bunch of this stuff. They've been sitting on it forever, not worth getting it out of the ground because it's so expensive, so much energy and so much effort. Until all of a sudden, very recently, they're like, wait, you'll pay $105 a barrel? Now it's worth it. We had this conversation. Please look up. The plan until recently was trains and trucks, tanker ships against the current in dangerous seas all the way to a crowded water access in Houston. And I told you this yesterday. This is why so many people have been pushing to build this transcontinental pipeline that goes all the way from Canada down to Houston. As a matter of fact, there's two of them. There's the Keystone XL and then another whose name I forget. Anybody know? Okay. I got started saying this stuff, but right then I just kind of lost my focus at the last minute. There's two arguments to building the pipeline. Number one is it saves a lot of money. And of course, that's important if the economics of this equation are in consideration. But the other argument is that pipelines are much, much safer than trucks and trains and tankers. If you rank them by risk, please look up. Flying petroleum would be the worst, but nobody does. The riskiest that we actually do is using the freeway system. Second riskiest that we actually do is using the train system. Third riskiest is tanker ships. And by far the safest is the pipelines. They still leak, they still blow up, they still suck, but they're the least bad of the options. I gotta point out that that whole debate about the Keystone Pipeline and whether it should be built and where it should be built and how it should be built may have confused a lot of different issues. First of all, in my opinion, as a public safety matter, it should be built. Just because all the other ways of using petroleum or moving petroleum are worse. I would rather not do petroleum. That's even safer. But that's not on the table. The second part of this conversation is who should pay for it, because who's going to make that money? You know that it's just the people who sell the petroleum, so I kind of feel like they should be the ones to pay for it, not public money. But third of all, picking where it goes, that's been really lame. As often happens, the United States chose to route it wherever the poorest people are. Or in some cases, the people with the least political representation. That's unfortunate, and that's just always how decisions get made, it seems. And so those with the least power just kind of got stuck with the pipeline, and that may not be fair. And there's a lot of important questions about where you put that pipeline. A couple of miles would have made a huge difference, just a couple miles that way. Anybody want to talk more about the pipeline or about assignment 6.3? Children, today we're going to get into renewable energy. Finally, we're done with fossil fuels. We had a chapter about like generic basics of energy and efficiency in energy terms. Then we've had like a week and a day or so of fossil fuels. We did the petroleum, we did the gas, we did the coal. We even did the non-traditional, super energy intensive, really nasty stuff like the tar sand and coal shale. And now we're done with fossil fuels. Today and Monday, we're going to talk about the renewables, the most sustainable option. At the top of assignment 6.4, you have a couple of words, I believe. In 6.4, I just want to point out that renewables are energy sources that don't run out. Technically, the sun will eventually run out, which means the wind will eventually run out, but you know what I mean. Us using them doesn't use them up. And I asked you in the warm-up to come up here and take a photograph of this whiteboard, because you're going to need a lot of notes. I want to warn you that my drawings should not be drawn to scale on your paper. This is what it takes to remind me of all the stuff I got to say to you. The less you know, the more you'll have to write. That's why I didn't say copy all of these, because I'd like you to make your own notes. I want to go in order today. We're going to go from here all the way to here. It might be cool if one of you can put this photo on Bookface for the kids that are absent and watching on the YouTube. Almost all of these are ways to spin a turbine. We've talked about turbines. A quick review of a very critical concept. Maybe you've heard about magnetic induction, where if you move a magnet past a wire, it puts a charge into that wire. Maybe you remember the left-hand rule of induction and the right-hand rule of magnetic field. So if you move the magnet this way, it will add a current through the wire going that way. And you can see 4 different wires, electricity is being put into all 4 of them, currents being put into all 4 of them. Now please look up, because this is a key concept. Watch the screen. I'm about to transition to a slightly different photo. Watch the screen. All 4 of these cables now have current, but what if it's the same cable being contacted by the magnet 4 different times? Each of those times, current will be added to the other current, meaning you'll get quadruple the current. And this is the foundation for all electricity generation, with very few exceptions. Almost everything here is a fancy way to move the magnets past the wires. Almost all the electricity on Earth is that one simple concept about magnets and wires. And you've seen the demo with the little blue light a million times over that already. So moving magnets past a wire, moving magnets past a wire, moving magnets past a wire, moving magnets past a wire. One of the only exceptions is this one, photovoltaic. So for number 29, you should have a photograph of this so that you'll be able to see the spelling of the words and the smaller details, even if you're seated in the back. I will allow you to have your phone out during this entire lecture. I hope you'll please be responsible and not make this a mistake. Check it out. I've got a very lightweight plastic car with wheels that spin freely, connected to a little electric motor, powered by a little solar panel. And this is a pretty good way to summarize everything you'll ever need to know about solar power. Watch this. If you can't see my feet over here, you should move so that you can. Really, it's just a second. You should move so you can see my feet. Here's everything that you need to know about solar power. I'm going to go outside. Look at that little patch of sunlight, okay? Watch.
Oh, you hear my knees? I'm so old. I'm breaking up knees and then just never go right.
Watch this. Hey. That's all you gotta know, kids. Watch. Doesn't work when it's in the shade. Works when it's in the sun. But you need sunlight for solar power. All right. is somebody good?
Just let it go. Go, go, go.
Aha! Science. Solar power only works when the sun is out, and then that's going to be a big struggle that we'll have to talk about. Watch. Solar panels are made out of 3 layers. You have to know what they are. They might be visible in your image. Number 1, there's a layer of silicon with boron in it. You have to know that it's silicon, and you have to know that it's boron. I'll explain why later. The second layer is a semi-permeable electrolyte membrane. Again, that should be visible in your picture. And the third layer is just silicon. Does anybody want to take me up on that photograph? I didn't do it earlier. Okay. So you've got layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3. And I'll explain why in a second, but you have to know the ingredients. Silicon with boron. That's not silicone, like on an aquarium or in a fake boob. It's silicon, like the element. Silicon with boron. Number 2 is a semi-permeable electrolyte membrane. And number 3 is just plain silicon. You've got those 3 layers that make up all, 99% of all solar panels. For much of my class, you haven't really need to know a lot of background in the other sciences, but kids who know a lot of science, this makes a lot more sense. Those of you who don't know a lot of science, you'll probably just have to write down some words. Every time. Wait for it. Wait for it. I think we're good. If you know what silicon is, 3,2P2. It basically has like the perfect pattern to build a grid. Silicon can be arranged in like a really neat, tidy grid. That's why we make microchips out of them, because they're very orderly and you can scale them like the tiles in this floor, except for the ones that don't match. If you look at all the blue tiles which do match, they're like perfect squares. You can go perfect squares to all the directions pretty much forever because they're perfect squares. Silicon is like a tile on a floor. It makes perfect little squares that let you build a grid of silicon. That's why silicon. But look at number 5, boron. If you speak chemistry, 1s2, 2s2, P1. Which means, for those of you who don't speak chemistry, the part that you would write is, boron has 1 loosely held electron. It's got 1 electron that it can just barely hold. Imagine this. You've got a magnet with a bunch of stuff in the middle and another magnet that's just barely held in place by that first magnet. They're just sticking together, but barely. That's boron. So silicon because of the grid, boron because of the 1 loosely held electron. It's barely in place. It's not optional, you have to know that part. Now the second layer, if you speak good English, it's probably something that you can figure out. A membrane, which is kind of permeable depending on charge. Semi-permeable electrolyte membrane. Sort of like a bouncer that only lets beautiful people into the bar. Chloe, I forgot to invite you to take one of the chairs up in the front. You can use that one if you want. I just see how far back you are and all this stuff. All right. Sort of like a bouncer that only lets beautiful people into the bar. You know, it's like semi-permeable, but they're being kind of picky about who gets in. Look at this. You see those little funnel shapes right there? 1, 2, 3, 4 little funnel shapes. Those are picky, depending on the charge. Now listen very, very carefully to this. There's a bazillion different semi-permeable electrolyte membranes. Some only allow positive charges to go up, and if you turn it upside down, that's called a positive down membrane. Some of them are only positive left, and if you turn it upside down, it becomes a positive right membrane. Some of them are only for neutral charges both ways, or neutral charges left, or neutral charges right, or whatever. There's some kind of nano-engineering that I don't understand because I'm not very intelligent. But there's something about charges which direction. And you do have to know that detail in this one, please look up. It's a negative down membrane. You have to know that it's negative down. Look, later today, I'll show you a positive right. They're just picky about which charge, which direction. So negative charges, one-way street, only downward. At my bar, only hairy old men, you can go in, or whatever. Yeah. Okay. It's one way. It's picky about which way, and picky about which charge. That's why it's semi-permeable electrolyte membrane, depending on the electrical charge. Finally, on the bottom, you've just got more silicon. Anyone ask me how to make a solar panel? Because I'm about to put it in the sun right now. Ready to explain how a solar panel works? Watch this. Sunlight strikes the solar panel. That energy excites the boron. And like a barely attached magnet, once you start shaking that, the magnet's going to fall off. Right? So watch. The boron gets excited, and the electrons fall off. Anybody know the charge of an electron? Electrons are what? Negative charge. If you don't know that basic of chemistry, you definitely want to put that in your notes because it comes up a lot. That electron, because it's negatively charged, will migrate which direction? Right? Because this is a one-way street for negative charges only to go downward only.
So the electron comes out of the boron and moves down?
That's right. The boron loses an electron because it's boron in sunlight. And the electrons migrate to the bottom because that's the membrane in this special sandwich. That's the great engineering science brilliance of solar panels. You put an electron donor on the top and a one-way street so that the donors will lose it in sunlight, and then the electron will all migrate to the bottom. That results, please look up, in a negative charge on one end, because all the electrons are piling up at that end. And of course, by removing a whole bunch of electrons, you've left a positive charge on the top side. Anybody know a common low-price household item that we all have that has a negative on one and a positive on the other? Ding! So a solar panel in the sunlight has electrical potential. It has a plus side and a minus side. You connect those with a wire and you've created a circuit. The electrons are attracted to the opposite charge. They want to go back home to daddy. They want to get out of the crowd of electrons and go to the place where there aren't electrons. There's a lot of ways to talk about that. And that's called a current. Please look up. All of these electrons want to go back to the boron. So you see those red arrows, they're going to travel through the wire. And what's going to happen when those electrons pass through that light bulb? They will now work to give off light. It's like my wacky car. Y'all hear it? There it goes. Sunlight, electrons running around doing work on the way before they go back. As long as that's in the sun, those electrons keep falling off the boron, and you can pretty much run this thing for eternity, more or less, as long as there's sunlight. You can put this thing on the freeway and it'll like make it down to San Diego. A couple of days, probably. So. I feel like it's stuck in a tunnel somewhere that I can't remember. Anybody have any questions on how a single solar panel works? As soon as you shut off the sunlight, those electrons will go back home. Like those barely attached magnets, when they get close enough, they will reattach. As long as there's nothing shaking them up, boron is whole again. And your electrons are not moving anymore, and there's no more current, and your solar panel is dead, and your battery has lost its charge, figuratively speaking. Yeah.
Is there any maintenance that needs to be done on like the panels, like in terms of like the membrane or anything like that?
In a practical sense, on an actual set of solar panels, wind vibrations will eventually loosen up some of those metal connections in the electrolytic membrane, and dust collects. And wind-blown debris will eventually lower the transparency of the glass on the surface. So like, yes, mechanically they degrade over time, but at the elemental level, as long as the boron stays boron and the membrane stays membrane and the silicon stays silicon, they will pretty much work forever. Solar-powered satellites and stuff. There are a lot of other alternative chemistries. This is just the original 1970s chemistry. Nowadays, there's a whole bunch of other ingredients that can be added to improve and slow and accelerate this transaction. But I think for the basics, the elemental stuff is the same. Yeah?
I heard a long time ago that it turns into like hazardous waste. Is that completely wrong?
I'm out of my league. I can't imagine anything especially heinous about silicon or electrolytic membranes or glass or boron. I can tell you that the boron over a really long time will absorb spare neutrons. So it'll kind of become radioactive over like a long time frame. But if you're already being bombarded by neutrons to reach them, then you're already screwed by the number of neutrons in your body. You know what I mean? Like it's not, I don't know if it's especially radioactive. No, I've never heard of it. Anybody else want to talk about the panels? Because pretty soon we're going to install them on houses. Okay, please look up. There's the Unabomber way, which is called off the grid, where you put all the electricity into batteries, and then when you need electricity, you take it out of the batteries. This is a solar charger for batteries, and then you drain the batteries to get electricity out. See? Solar panel, wire, batteries, electricity. I don't know if you can read that, but batteries suck. Batteries are just not as good as you imagine. The idea makes sense, where electricity goes in and electricity comes out, but it's not actually that successful. It's not that simple. The percentages of electricity that you get out for how much electricity you put in are really, really, really bad. Like, I don't know, I'm not an expert, there's a lot of research going into this, but I believe the best battery that you can buy as a consumer is like 18% or 19% efficiency after a year of use. And a lot of those get down to single digits, and like the theoretical holy grail of batteries is something better than 25% efficiency. Like, I'll bet you that like NASA satellites can do a little better, but for like you and me as consumers, batteries just suck. Yeah?
Do people mostly use A or B? Like on-grid or off-grid?
You only use A if you have to.
Okay.
So A is the better than nothing, but it sucks. Like sailboats, they don't have a choice. Crazy Unabomber shacks up in the mountains that are like miles from a power pole, like, well, okay, no
Is
choice
it like,
there.
if the power goes off, will the batteries kick in if you have like both? So is it like a safety kind of?
Yeah, there's like people who use them for like a little emergency storage. If you got grandma on life support or whatever, it's good to have a backup. But honestly, batteries are just, they're really, really not very effective. And they don't age well, please look up. They suck, and they're expensive, and they're inefficient, and they require maintenance, like batteries are not forever. So really off-grid systems, you probably want to put that in your notes. They're just kind of like only if absolutely necessary. But nobody would want to do this if you didn't have to. It's like pulling your own teeth. I guess if I had to, but that sucks. I wonder if I could pull my own teeth. I'm afraid that I would break them. Because you can't squeeze them too hard or they explode.
Try it.
I'm kind of traumatized by dentists because they had to extract my tooth here once when I was a little boy. Or seventh grade. No, third grade. And when they were trying to take it out, it exploded. And so there was like shards of root left in the socket. And it went like pop! And like all this tooth was in my mouth. And I was like, ah! And then like I had to dig it out. And I was like squirming and screaming. And now I hate dentists. Yeah, I have.
Why'd they take it out?
Say what now?
Why'd they take it out?
Because I broke it on a Tic Tac.
Oh.
It was probably rotten already, that's why it exploded so easily. B is what everybody does. Like all the solar panels you've ever seen, pretty much anywhere you've ever seen them are probably on B. Like all the urban ones, all your neighborhood, if your mom and dad's solar panels, it's B. B is called on-grid. And please watch my hand. It's important that you see the movement of the electricity. Watch this. When the solar panel makes electricity, anything that's not diverted to your house spins the meter backward and goes onto the grid. That gets used by your neighbor or your neighbor's neighbor or some dude down the street, but it probably won't travel a mile because someone is going to need that electricity before it reaches any further. So Edison buys it from you, the meter goes backward, you're getting a credit. And then they're selling it to your neighbor, or the other neighbor, or the other neighbor. All of their meters are spinning the normal direction. You're the closest power plant to them. So you're the highest power electricity, so they just draw yours first. Please look up. When the sun is not available, electricity comes off the grid, the meter spins in the normal direction, and that's where your house gets the electricity. You work as a power plant when the sun is out, and then you just work like a regular consumer when the sun is not out. Watch this. It requires what's called a two-way meter, a backward and forward meter, which is actually surprisingly kind of like high-tech cutting-edge meters. And like, there's a lot of resistance to installing those. The utilities have to spend a lot of money to put those in. So honestly, in many parts of the United States, you just can't do this. Like, nope, we don't have the right meter. It's just one little piece that they own at your house. You all realize that you own the house and you own the electrical panel and you own the lid to the panel, and there's this one little part with a glass ball on it, and you don't own that. You can't touch that. That belongs to Edison. And you're like, well, I want another meter that goes backward, and they're like, nope, can't do solar, sorry. Something else about this is, you know, it's kind of cheap. Like, you're getting a credit with all the unused electricity. And for some people, it's even profitable. You can put enough panels up there that in some parts of the United States, the utility will write you a check. Like, hey, thanks, we got to sell a lot of electricity. Just take some money. Not all utilities will write you a check, but most of them do. Also notice that there's no storage here. Storage is really inefficient for electricity because batteries suck, and you got to remember that. Batteries really suck. There's no storage here. You're just making it for the neighbors until it's all used up. It's like filling up your glass, and if it overflows, it goes to your neighbor's glass, and if it overflows, it goes to your other neighbor's glass. Are there any questions about how to do solar panels on a house, off-grid or on-grid? I'm going to move on if you don't ask questions. Sure? Okay, because this is exciting. I like these. There's also this thing called solar thermal. Has anybody ever used a magnifying glass to burn or etch wood? Or like burn your little sister or burn an ant? Okay, A, you're a sick person if you burn ants. Bad, bad, bad children. I would never do such a thing, ever. B, how does that work when we do that? Right, you're focusing a whole bunch of sunlight onto one place. So all of that energy is aimed at one little spot. Now check this out. Sunlight parabolic mirror, pipe full of stuff that you heat up, like this. All those rays of sunlight bounce from the mirror and hit that one little focal point. The parabolic mirrors are long, like me across the room, and suspended at the, what do you call the focal point of a parabola? The what?
Vertex.
Vertex?
It's at the focus point.
Focus point?
Yeah.
And you said what? Vertex?
Vertex is the lowest point. That's like where the mirror is the most going. You would suspend it at the focus point because that's where all the sunlight would reflect.
Okay, well, I don't know what I'm talking about. There's a pipe at the focus point, or vertex maybe, I have no idea what I'm saying. That pipe is full of stuff. All the sunlight heats that stuff. And imagine if you have like a square mile of these mirrors and that pipe runs through all of those mirrors. By the time the juice comes out of the pipe, that's been struck by a tremendous amount of sunlight. You've basically aggregated all these magnifying glasses into one body of water. That gets really, really, really hot. Now that pipe that holds that water is so hot that it's a heat source. You can take that pipe full of hot stuff into cold water and it makes steam. And that steam can spin a turbine if it's under the right amount of pressure or whatever. Newsflash, and just to be technically accurate, it's not usually water, because water wants to evaporate at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a really low boiling point. So usually people will use like oil or super, super, super salty salt water, because that doesn't want to boil until it gets really, really, really hot. So that pipe will get to like 900, 1000, 1200 degrees. And it'll still be fluid. That's a really good heat source. You put that in some cold water, you can make a lot of steam. Anybody ever been to the big island of Hawaii, Kona? Like, the next time that you fly into Kona, right as you come into the airport, there's this moment where you fly over the top of the island, and you make like a turn to land, and you go over the ocean where all the manta rays are, and then you come in and you come from the ocean onto the landing strip at the airport. If you remember that moment where you started that hairpin turn, you look down and it's a field of these, because it's like a university-run or state-run experimental station. Yeah?
Can you use any water, or does it have, like, for the steam, or does it have to be like a certain?
I'm pretty sure that you want it to be moderately clean so that it boils well.
So you can't use like seawater?
I don't know, there might be an interesting trade-off where it takes more temperature to boil salt water, but it's free, so maybe that's better. You have to dump your brine afterward, you know, all that salt has to go somewhere and that's not gonna evaporate. So I don't know, there might be some technical challenges. Plus salt water is really corrosive, so nobody really wants to use salt in plenty. But maybe wastewater or something, I don't know. Yeah?
I can't remember if you already explained this. Do you use like pipes to get the hot stuff in the water?
That's right, it's a heat exchange coil.
Okay, you can.
Yeah. Like, if you've ever seen like the firebox for a wood-fired jacuzzi, you don't put the fire directly to the water, you put the fire to the metal to transfer the heat to the water that's moving through. This is the opposite concept. Now, I gotta warn you that this idea, with all the fields of parabolic mirrors and a little pipe full of stuff moving, that's old school. Anybody been to Las Vegas recently? You don't have to tell me why, but anybody been to Las Vegas recently? When you drive to Las Vegas and you're in the California side, right before you enter Nevada, you should look to the left. And you'll see that. What you see here is a whole bunch of computer-aimed single mirrors creating the equivalent of a really fancy magnifying glass. They shine all the light from the sun reflected onto one point. If you were to throw a human corpse at that light bright spot, that corpse would evaporate a couple feet away from the glass. You would never touch it. The tip of the tower gets to some tremendous number. And really, you know, you understand, right, that if you had more mirrors, you could make something hotter, right? Everybody, right? Because if you're gathering more and more and more sunlight, you could eventually get back to pretty close to the surface temperature of the sun if you had enough mirrors. Right? Okay, what?
Didn't someone melt a car?
Yeah, there was that thing where they built a skyrise in London that was parabolic, and when the sun would travel to the right spot, it would go zing and melt cars on the streets. You were like, I guess we built that already. Comedy. Check this out. All of the sunlight gets aimed at one point. So you've got a field of mirrors and a giant tower, focused energy to make some really hot stuff. And the only limit is how much heat your material can tolerate. Because obviously if you make it hotter, anything you make it out of would melt. You could find the super special, like, hottest metal, and whatever is running in the mirrors, you could melt that too. So the tipping point is, what's a practical material, what's a rational temperature, how much glass are we going to use for that? The next time you drive to Vegas, you'll see these beauties. There's 3 of them. Each of the mirror fields is controlled by some computer somewhere. Each of them heats up the tower. You can see in this close-up that there's some plumbing inside the tower and then some stuff here. And that power line that's very difficult to see, that takes away all the juice. Here's the crazy thing about these, and I love this technology. I think that this is a really big deal. I'm super excited about this. Sustainable future, y'all. I like this idea because you can make this really, really, really hot. And I think you all realize that electricity storage sucks, but it's possible to store heat, right? Like this got heated at 5 a.m. today. So I woke up to see the eclipse. Did any of you wake up to see the eclipse? I woke up my little babies and we went out on the porch and we sat on my couch with blankets and hot chocolate and we watched the eclipse. That's my once per decade good dad moment. Now I get to go back to ignoring them and being abusive. The nice thing about these solar thermal systems is electricity is really difficult to store, but heat can be stored for a long time. The ones in Las Vegas can make electricity 5 days after sunlight. Like you get that up to, I don't know, a gazillion degrees, and then it cools down to 20% of a gazillion degrees, which is still above the boiling temperature of water. So you run that pipe through some water and it can still make steam. Now this is pretty hot. It's pretty exciting because, you know, like you solve the whole darkness and clouds and winter storm situation. You can now use sunlight 24/7 for a long, long time to make electricity. You know, these systems, your house is still running on natural gas or coal or petroleum or nuclear until the sun's not out. You're just another Edison customer. But here, it's sunlight in the daytime and sunlight at night and sometime on the cloudy day and sunlight on the... Okay. Talk more photovoltaic, or are we done? Yeah? Solar thermal?
Solar thermal. Could you use, like, I know they're less...
Diet? Yes, I can use a diet.
Could you use photovoltaic panels to do the reflecting?
Woohoo! Hadn't thought of that. Maybe. That might be one of those things where you're splitting the difference, you know? Like, is a knife better for steak or for bone breaking? You probably don't want to use the same knife for both. That's probably the worst possible example I could have chosen. My father refuses to believe that knives are different, and so he'll take like my really nice fillet knives or whatever and use them to split coconuts. I'm like, Dad, you can't do that, Dad. And he's like, ah, knife's a knife. And he'll like grab, like, I sharpen all my knives, like I get them shaving sharp. And then he over and go like, oh, bam! And like use them to crack coconuts. And I'm like, Dad. So I don't know, it was on my mind when you said that. Okay, what?
Why is photovoltaic not passive?
Why is photovoltaic what?
Not passive. It says not passive at the top.
Right. Passive is when you're using solar energy to create heat or cold as an alternative to traditional energy sources in a home. It has no moving parts. Yeah?
So these are most common like desert kind of areas, right? So why don't they do them in Palm Springs? Why do they do the wind turbines there?
It just happens to be in a really good windy spot. They probably could do a hell of a lot of solar too, and they may for all I know. I think they should. They could shade all their parking lots with electricity generation. Yeah?
How much energy do those produce?
Wind turbines?
Solar.
Solar towers? Quite a tremendous amount. This number sucks because it's still kind of an experimental technology. So people build it and they're done and they use it and they realize, oh crap, we should have used these instead of those. And so we're really at the like beta version, like we're not even 1.0 yet. But these three provide a really significant percentage of Las Vegas' electricity use during parts of the year. And Vegas is one of the highest electricity per human of any human on Earth. So it's a fairly significant energy potential. I'll bet you can Google this info. It's the California border Las Vegas solar thermal farm. It's like Del Rey or some name. It's like 2 words. Yeah. No. No. Ready to move on? Number 30. Number 30. Number 30 says hydrogen fuel cell, and it says not an energy source. This is energy storage. For all these technologies, when I talk about the trade-offs, I'm sorry, you do have to know the good and the bad and how it fits into reality, not just how they work. I couldn't fit that all on the board because I figure I'm going to do that conversationally. You already know some of that, so I didn't want to force you to write it. But you do have to know like good and bad and what's good and what doesn't work. Hydrogen fuel cells are not a source of energy, but you use energy to make hydrogen, and then you use that hydrogen to let out electricity. So it's like a battery. It stores electricity for later. You use energy to make hydrogen. That's not free. And once you have the hydrogen, you can put it in to make electricity happen. You'll notice in green right there that hydrogen fuel cells rely on an input of hydrogen, and that takes energy to make. One of those things that a chemistry dork would know and the rest of you will just have to write down, and I don't really have a lot of time to do all the depth of this Band-Aid, but watch. Over here, if you've ever heard of the Bohr atomic model, if you survived the 7th and 8th grades, somewhere in junior high or whatever, they probably told you that atoms have a nucleus with electrons around it, that the nucleus has protons, neutrons, and the electrons are zipping around. Sometimes they might have lied to you and said that they're in rings. How many of you remember that from 7th or 8th grade because you survived science with somebody? Okay, now watch. Helium, for example, is a traditional element. It has a matched number of proton and neutron most of the time, and then a matched number of electrons. Generic, simple. They were right about that in the 7th grade. But check this one out. Hydrogen is very special. If you don't know this, you must write it down. Hydrogen has no neutrons. Hydrogen has an atomic mass of 1.00 something, which means it's 1 proton and 1 electron only. You must know that it's 1 proton, 1 electron. That's a really important detail. You can actually make a bunch of other fuel cells too that aren't just hydrogen, but hydrogen is the cleanest and the simplest. Looky here. A hydrogen fuel cell has one metal, a semi-permeable electrolyte layer, and another metal. This semi-permeable electrolyte layer is positive right, and you have to know that, positive right.
Which one?
Positive right.
And those are metal things on the side?
Anode and cathode. Positive right. And check this out. Do you all see that little like burgundy line of dots on the left-hand side? Hydrogen fuel cells are really expensive because they use a very rare metal, usually platinum. You might know that platinum is very expensive. So expensive that when Lil Wayne went to jail, we the American tax dollars, yeah, We, the American taxpayers, had to use our American tax dollars to buy him a dentist to take his $1 million grill out of his mouth because he was worried that his thug life would not be defensible in prison. And of course, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and we can't cruel and inhumane punishment force him among the prison population with $1 million in his mouth. So we spent like an unknowable gazillion of dollars on really expert plastic surgeon dental dorks to pull out his $1 million grill, put it in a safe for a year while he did his time wearing regular old ceramic caps like all the Hollywood stars. And he had a year of being Lil Wayne with the dorky hair and tattoos but plain old teeth. And then before he got out of jail, he's like, yo, that's my trademark. You can't mess with my business. And everybody's like, okay, Constitution. And so we paid again and put him back. Newsflash, the rich win even if they're in prison. Okay, watch. That expensive platinum is a catalyst because it makes chemical reactions happen. Like this one. Watch. Hydrogen hits the platinum. Get ready for these details. You'll have to draw them, and it's hard to see up here. You get a couple of electrons. And a couple of protons. You know, the hydrogen split. Because catalysts make chemistry happen. So, in this case, hydrogen in the presence of platinum makes electrons and protons. And where are those protons going to go because of this membrane? You should have written it down. They go where? Right, because they're positive, so they go right. Positive right. Remember that? So they start to migrate over to this side, and when they migrate over to that side, you start to quote-unquote charge the battery, and now you can run a car on electricity. In a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, you put hydrogen against the fuel cell, that hydrogen splits to either side, making the negative side and the positive side. And now you've got an electric car with a charged battery. As long as you add hydrogen, your battery stays charged. Everything about the electricity is the same. Electrons flow, they do work along the way. When they show up on this side, they reunite with the protons to make hydrogen, and then they take oxygen out of the air to make water. The end. Hydrogen fuel cells are really nice. They convert hydrogen into electricity. The only emissions is water. But I gotta stress something. Hydrogen doesn't grow on trees. You can't just pick it up off the ground. You gotta use a lot of energy to make hydrogen. So this is storage of energy. I know that's a lot of detail. There's a couple chemistry dorks that are like, okay, sure, the positives go to the red, I got you. But I know a lot of you might be confused. Anybody want to talk to me about this? Because I can help you, but we're going to have to move on. You're going to have to remember this. So, yeah.
So the protons go right and the electrons go up, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you connect it with a wire, you got electrons on one side and protons on the other. So that's now a battery. If this was standing upside down, they'd be going down. Yeah.
Is the hydrogen in liquid form when it comes in, or gaseous?
I will assume that it's gaseous.
Okay.
But yeah. Because I have a hydrogen fuel cell. I can make hydrogen here. And it makes liquid, but at the top is where it comes out as gas. So it's got to be gas against battery. Yeah. Yeah.
So does it need 2H to go in, or is that just to illustrate that it becomes water? Does it need that 2 electron thing?
I think it should should have been H2. Hydrogen gas.
Just Hoffmaker.
Because Hoffmaker. Yes.
Couldn't we just technically like re-separate the H2O and then use the hydrogen again?
Yes. But remember that you need energy to do that. That's how we got the hydrogen in the first place. You split water in one place, let the oxygen out into the air, keep all that hydrogen in a bottle, rub it up against the hydrogen fuel cell to get electricity out, and the end product is water. But remember, the energy input to make that hydrogen in the first place has to, by law, be greater than the electricity output of this battery. So you can keep going, but every time you're going to lose some energy. What else? Now we get a couple of fast ones because they're simple. So you're going to have to write really, really, really fast. Children, what's at the bottom of every canyon on Earth? Water, the river that carved the canyon, right? So if you can find, look up, a deep spot in a canyon, plug it with a dam, the river in that canyon can't go anywhere, so it'll start to fill up what's called a reservoir, right? You open the faucet at the bottom of the dam, water comes shooting out over your turbines to make electricity, and that little bit goes downhill. When you don't want electricity, you shut off the faucet. And you can store that water. And theoretically, unless you live in Santa Barbara, the baby Jesus is going to keep making rain. So unless you live in Santa Barbara, this is the renewable and kind of sustainable energy source. I'll give you a minute to write what you needed to write. When you're done drawing that dam, please look up. Or just don't. Like to. In the next unit, we're going to talk about water, and some of you have already heard the punchline, but this is probably not the time for details. Rain is more or less renewable. So as an energy source, you know, there's no carbon, the baby Jesus makes it rain over and over. You just hold the water for a while, then you let it go. That's all nice. But here's the problem. Migratory fish, the dams fill up with sand, a lot of the water evaporates before you can use it. So it's kind of renewable, but not very sustainable. At this point in the conversation, you should probably know that dams are played out. Most developed nations are not building dams anymore. Turns out that the water's renewable, but the rivers and the ecosystems don't usually like it. I could talk more about dams, but I could also move on. Raise your hand if you want to ask me something about dams. Next. The wind turbine is so easy to understand because I don't have to say anything. Wind turbine. You got it. That's the whole explanation right there. Yeah.
What does it say at the bottom?
I will.
Oh.
Please look up. First of all, these are pretty cheap because once you build it, they take very, 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 very little maintenance. Per kilowatt per year, it's the least maintenance of any energy source. Like, yeah, they all have an upstart cost, but they have the lowest operation cost. And you know, we've got a lot of land with wind on it, and a lot of water with wind on it. So there's lots of wind potential out there. Baby Jesus keeps making wind as long as the sun shines, so no problem. Interesting detail that you probably want to know. The future of wind turbines is not more of them, but bigger ones. Some of you understand the relationship between radius and area of a circle. You add a little more radius, but you get a lot more surface area. So if you speak math, it's a square root function, right? Pi r squared. So adding a little radius squares that benefit in how much wind you can gather and make into electricity, right? You know what I'm saying by that? It has a multiplier of 3 point whatever, and then an exponent. So a little radius goes a long way. So now we're making these like lunatic towers that are like crazy sketchy tall. I got a couple of homies that work on these because the climbing world has a lot of technical rigging involved, and so a lot of these doors do technical rigging. It's like a road trip job that you can take for little contracts all over the place and go climbing. Oh my God, some of my homies have been up on some really scary towers. And like the blades get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So those of you who've seen the Palm Springs turbines, watch next time you're there. You come driving down Highway 10, I think it is, and you drop down into the Palm Springs Basin and you look to the right, and there's this field of like 1,000 little turbines like this, and they're all standing still because they're effing useless. Then there'll be like 100 bigger ones and like 3 really big ones. Those 3 really big ones make more than everything else combined. The future is, how big can we make these things? And really, this has become like a really interesting question about torsion and stability and density and materials engineering to get the biggest possible blades. You guys want to hear something really, really, really crazy? Imagine a floating wind farm up in the jet stream, like a boomerang shape, with like 5 big blades on the front, tethered to the ground like a gigantic kite, up at 30,000 feet, stationary. The jet stream never stops. It's extremely cold up there, so things are more efficient because there's lower temperatures. And the wind of the jet stream is, I don't know the number, but it's always like, 150 miles an hour. There's like hurricane force 24/7 forever. So you just have to find a way to get that thing up there, make a really strong cable with a big old concrete anchor. And people are working on this. The math right now says 2 of those could power America forever. Like, it's over, everybody. We just got to figure it out. Like, we're done. It's cool. We just got to get 2 of those. That's it. Let's go. Pick it up there. There's like tons of electricity coming down the wire. And it's over. We're good. Can you imagine? Like, what could possibly go wrong, right? So they need like Air Force protection, and like they have like a wind down program, and they need these massive landing strips. And people are like, well, do we want to wait until we have space elevators to get it up there? Do you want to launch them and assemble them in orbit and then pull them down? It's nutty. It's nutty. But the math is really easy. It's the jet stream, like, a lot of energy up there. Look at that. That's big. There's almost nothing for scale. Look at the container down in the foreground for scale. Those are the extra long containers. So we're going bigger, 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 bigger. Now please look up. Birds aren't stupid. You all realize that if you want to find the windiest place on our landscape, you just watch where all the migratory birds are going, right? So like, oh, is that where all the ducks are flying? That's where I want to stick my blender. A couple of years ago, my wife and I were doing a section of the Pacific Crest Trail, and like we had some complications, and we was kind of over it because it was hot and crappy, and we didn't have as much water as we thought we were going to find out there. And we're like, screw this. So we bombed out of the Tehachapi foothills, and we were just kind of cross country, like I'm pretty sure Tehachapi's that way. So we just kind of like came out of the mountains, and in order to reach the town of Tehachapi, we had to like hop a fence and walk through a wind farm. And in a mile and a half or so, I probably stepped over like 200 dead birds. Birds are smart, birds are agile, but birds don't look up. Why would evolution make a bird look up? All they ever have above them is sky. Birds look down. So you got all these birds going, I wonder where the water is, I wonder where the flowers are, where are all the insects? And he goes, whoop, pow! Just guillotine. Like the birds you find have been like snapped. Like they look like that. Like you'll find them with like the wing snapped like that, or like the wings snapped like that. Like they just get like just plugged. So the birds are one problem. This says they kill stuff. You know what else they kill? They kill bats. How many of you have heard that bats have sonar? That can hunt insects from far away at night even? Now, bats are exceedingly agile. If you're into evolution, bats don't have a wing like a bird with these bones. Bats have a wing with these bones. So a bat can change the shape of its wing with great dexterity. Instead of 2 knuckles like a seagull, a bat has 180 knuckles, or whatever that number is. So bat wings are like, so bats when they fly, they're super agile. Maybe you've had a pleasure of seeing them fly. They're amazing animals. That sonar is real. There's a bat in South America that can sense a human hair a millimeter above water from a mile away. Like, the best military sonar cannot do that. And these stupid little things with a brain the size of a pimple, you can bait them by moving a human hair. They're like, come down and pick it up from a mile away. So how the heck do these things kill them? Because I'll tell you right now, wind turbines don't hit bats. Bats are too smart and agile for that. How do the turbines kill them? Yeah.
Does it like pull them in or something? With the...
Kinda. You're thinking about the right detail with the air pressure.
Oh, there's like no like lift underneath them from like the wings or something?
So you would think that it's lift, but these aren't airplanes. Bats lift themselves through the air. They collapse their wing and then push down, the way that you swim. So they don't depend on lift the way that an airplane does. They depend on calories to push themselves up. Anybody else? Yeah?
Maybe it like messes it up so they get so tired and they fall or something.
I don't think so. Check this out. You all understand how lift works on an airplane wing? It's curvy on top and flat on the bottom. So as you cut that thing through the air, it spreads out these air molecules because they're traveling over a longer distance than this distance. So you have a greater density of molecules here than you do above the wing, and that's what generates lift. Neat, right? Because it's curvy on top. High pressure, low pressure makes the thing go up. Those wind turbines, as they're spinning, are being impacted by wind, air particles, high pressure on the front side. On the back side, the wind that got around the turbine is just kind of regathering, so there's low pressure on the back. The bats come through, sense, however they do their creepy sonar stuff, that there's like a turbine. They come right through, and when they hit the low pressure drop, their lungs get pulled out of their mouth. Science.
Did you see that?
You can hate me all you want, but science is cool. You'll find them with either their lung hanging out of their mouth or like blood coming out of their mouth. And you know bats are like really important because insect control and farms and like $1 million. Plus they're like really neat and beautiful, like ecological balance, predator effect and diversity and pollinators. So please look up. Really economical, endless potential. but there's a lot of engineering going. The wacky thing about the wind turbines is you've got hippies versus hippies. Because on one side, there's liberals like me, boo, petroleum, we want wind power. And then on the other side, you've got more liberals like me, like, yeah, but I just really like birds too. Plus, you know, all the places that have a lot of wind, they probably have really nice views, so rich people live there and nobody likes to look at these things. So putting them coastally is tough, and putting them on ridgelines is tough, because that's pretty much the nicest places you could live, right? So it's tough to find a place that has a lot of wind, that doesn't have a lot of opposition to a huge eyesore. What kind of time do we have? Ooh, we got 15 minutes. I think I can finish today. It'd be the only period that finishes. Wouldn't that be sweet? Watch this. Number 32, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ways to make electricity in the ocean. 4 ways. And before I say anything else, it's not on the board, but write this down. The ocean is a hostile environment. And there's a lot of sensitive ecosystems there. You know, if you ask every boat owner on the planet, the ocean is a hostile environment. Salt is rough, sand sucks. The temperature fluctuations are a problem. So the ocean is out to get all human technology. There's very, very little you can put in the ocean that the ocean won't F it up. Second of all, oh yeah, let's do a giant construction system on a bay? Like in the intertidal, where oceans have hell of currents on the surface in the tropics, there's really no way that you're not wrecking some sensitive ecosystem. Except maybe for this one that I'll tell you about last, I'm pretty excited about. All right, you ready? I want to go kind of fast so we can finish this today. Number 1, it's called tidal barrage. You block a bay with a dam. Now, I'm going to need a volunteer who is tallish. Thanks, Davis. Come on. Watch this, kids. Put your hand up. And I'm going to say open, close, open, close, open, close. Got it? Open. Now, this is the valve inside my dam. Here's the bay, here's the ocean. At high tide, Davis is going to close off the dam. At low tide, he's going to open it, and there goes all the salt water, and that runs the dam. That leaves low tide inside the bay. I wait for high tide, and then Davis is going to open it, and that will flood the bay with high tide. Now we wait for the tide to drop, and then when it's really low tide, it drains out. Thank you. Good work. See? You fill it up at high tide, you dump it out at low tide. Now that has some benefits. People tried this. There was one of these in Argentina, one in Norway, I think one in Alaska or Canada. Anybody recognize something special about Alaska, Canada, southern Argentina, and Norway? They are at the extreme latitudes where you have the most extreme tide changes. You try to go do this in Belize, and high tide to low tide is like 1.5 feet. That's not very impressive. You're not going to run much dam with that. It'd be like, okay. You want like nuking tides, like spin that turbine, right? So you've got to go to like the Bay of Fundy or something. But the humans all live around the equator, and all the high tides are at the extremes. Something else that sucks is they're really expensive because like plumbing and dams and like wildlife gets sucked through the blender, and like this is kind of past tense. Like we don't really do this anymore. There was one benefit. I can forecast high tide and low tide for infinity. You want to know the tides 1,000 years from now? I can just punch that into the Google machine and tell you exactly when high tide is, down to a minute. So we can tell you when you're going to have electricity, and you can plan on that. Like, oh, you can turn off the natural gas plant at 10:43 on the year 21,000. So it's kind of nice. You can plan it, you can schedule it, but you know, the ocean sucks. Next, please look up. People have tried submerged turbines that spin with current, or what are called turbine reefs that spin with like water going up and down on the shore. And these just seem to be a lot of technology for not a lot of power. Currents aren't that strong. Water splashing up on the beach is not that powerful. I got a picture, I think. Here's a, yeah, that's a coral, that's a current one. And man, they just, you know, they're like a bunch of stuff in the salt water, and the water's not moving that fast. Like the really burly ripping currents, like it's still like, it's not like a ton of force. You know, water has drag, so those turbines, they don't want to spin that easily. So it's kind of, not really happening. Again, in Hawaii, they tried this. Imagine you've got some hot tropical water. Like 85 degrees and up, like really, really, really hot. You can take a low boiling point fluid, low boiling point. Pump that underwater through a pipe until it warms up to boiling, and that'll come out as steam to spin that turbine. Then you condense it and cool it back to storage. This was an interesting idea. It's called ocean thermal. Remember that this is a heat exchanger. And I believe that they use a type of ammonium, something that evaporates at a really, really, really low temperature. So it'll be liquid on the air, but once you push it into hot enough water, it comes out as a vapor, but it just doesn't have a lot of force. So again, not a ton of work. People tried this one and it was just low yield. This was very little electricity. But I am going to finish. I can tell you my favorite. It's called the oscillating water column. When my children were little, I used to be in charge of bath time. It was one of the only things that I could do when I came home. I would work really late, so I wasn't really around to be a very involved father, and I regret that. It kind of haunts me. But when I learned about this, I thought of a way to explain it based on my limited father duty. Bathtub. Make sure you can see me. I'm using this cup, okay? I'm sitting in a bath playing with my kids. Splash, 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 splash. Everybody got it? Yeah? Watch me. I take this thing, and I pick up water, and I dump it on my head, and they go, ha, 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 Dad. Because, you know, they're babies, whatever. Yeah, exactly. Then, if I leave this on the surface of the water, it'll float. If I pull it down below the surface and I let go, what's going to happen? Right? Because like the water pressure, air pressure, equalizing, everybody knows this crap, right? Watch this. If I take it like this and I've just got nothing but air in there, and I push it down below the surface of the water, and I let it go, what's it going to do? Right? Because you trap that air bubble and the air wants to rise and the water wants to level and stuff. Everybody knows how this works, right? Yeah? Now watch this. What if I go like this, fill it up with water, turn it upside down, try to bring it out? When I let go, what's it going to do? Because that water wants to level itself. Everybody understands how this works, right? This is all basics. Now imagine this. Made a hole in it. I made a hole in it. Now, when I push it down into the water, what's going to happen in here? It's going to fill up, right? Because what's going to come out of that little hole?
Air.
Right? And can you imagine that if I go, I can use the water surface to power air movement through that little hole, right? Does that make sense to everybody? So now, what if I anchor this to a pier and let water movement force air through that little hole? That's called an oscillating water column. As the ocean goes up and down, there's a piston of water moving up and down, and that will drive wind past a turbine, like this. Sea floor, sea surface going up and down makes a piston go up and down. That makes air go in and out over that turbine. How cool is that? You know what's rad? There's no moving parts in the ocean. The moving parts are just subjected to air, and yeah, that's salt air, but that's, you can kind of deal with that easier. You know what else is cool? These offer pretty critical fishery habitat. You can farm oysters on them. Fish will often shelter there. You know something else? You don't have to anchor them to the coastline. You can put those on barges out at sea, because the surface is still moving out in the ocean. How cool is that? You want to get even more excited? Watch this. You can bank them up. I can take a pier and put one of these on the end, one on the side, another one on the side, another one on the side, another one on the side. And all of these can contribute to an out turbine and an in turbine. Because they have a president.
What do you mean you can bank them?
You can bank them. So imagine that this wind is trying to power one turbine here, right?
Right.
But what if all the upward pistons are going through a one-way valve into one main line of air pressure? Now you've got not the surface area of one chamber, but the surface area of half those chambers going up, spinning that turbine, and all the ones going down are using the suction air on the opposite side of the same turbine. So they can all power one big-ass turbine at a time. And you can have 1,000 of those piers on a barge and nobody ever has to see it. 2020, y'all! Make your voice be heard. You'll be 18, register to vote. Vote for me. For the president, 2020. Yeah.
So water rises, that pushes the air that spins one turbine, and then when it comes down, that sucks it and spins it the other way. Yeah.
So you can have a lot of different ways to design this, okay? If you're smart, you visualize whatever you want. But you know what a check valve is, a one-way valve? It has a spring, so it goes this way, no problem, but it walks out the other direction, right? So you can have suction coming from one pipe, and fuel going to the other pipe. So now you can bank all of the fuel pipes together and all the suction pipes together. Right? So all the piston sucking from one point. That's a lot of draw. If you're dropping, a square mile of water in one. And then all the ones rising are flowing pretty fast. That's a lot of force. And you can imagine a point where you you've got suction air coming in and pushing air going out next to that, you could run a single turbine, because those blades would take this way and then they would take that way.
Right.
So you could combine all of this. The math is limitless. You can produce as much